You won't believe what happened the day my wife came back from deployment. Picture this. She had just stepped off the USS Truman after months at sea. Uniform crisp, medals shining, and the pride of an entire crew behind her. She was finally home. We were ready for nothing but hugs, laughter, and peace. But instead, we got Karen. Yes, the HOA's self-appointed queen. The woman who treats the entire neighborhood like it's her personal kingdom. And this time, she didn't just come knocking on our door, she called the cops. Why? Because according to her, my wife didn't belong here. Big mistake. I'll never forget the moment. My kids and I had decorated the front yard with banners, balloons, and a giant "Welcome Home" sign. Neighbors gathered around to cheer as my wife's car pulled up. She stepped out in her navy dress whites, looking like the definition of honor and discipline. People clapped. Some even cried. But not Karen. She marched over with her clipboard, her little HOA badge, and that permanent scowl plastered on her face. "This is not allowed," she barked. We all froze. "Excuse me?" I asked. Karen pointed at the decorations, the parked cars, and even at my wife herself. "This is a violation of HOA policy. Unauthorized signage. Unauthorized gathering. And as for her," she gestured toward my wife, "I'll need proof she actually lives here." The crowd gasped. My wife narrowed her eyes but stayed calm. Months of commanding sailors had trained her to handle pressure. But before she could even speak, Karen whipped out her phone and said, "That's it. I'm calling the police." 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled up. The officers got out, looking confused at the balloons and the cheering neighbors. Karen rushed to them like she had just won the lottery. "Officers," she shouted, "that woman is trespassing. She's impersonating military personnel to sneak into our community. Arrest her immediately." I swear, the whole neighborhood went silent. You could hear a pin drop. One officer approached my wife cautiously. "Ma'am, can we see some ID?" Karen smirked like she had already won. "Good luck proving that fake uniform is real," she sneered. But what Karen didn't know was that my wife outranked not only the HOA, but also the very officers standing in front of her. Calm as ever, my wife reached into her bag and pulled out her military ID. Not just any ID. A Navy commander's ID. The officer's eyes widened. He looked at Karen, then back at the ID. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "thank you for your service." Karen's face turned pale. That's fake. It has to be," she stammered. But my wife wasn't done. She stepped closer, her voice steady and commanding. "Officer," she said, "I am Commander Reynolds, U.S. Navy. I just returned from active duty aboard the USS Truman, and this woman is wasting your time with a false report." The other officer snapped to attention. "Understood, Commander." And then, get this, he turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you realize filing a false police report is a crime?" You've never seen a person unravel so fast. Karen started waving her arms, shouting about community rules and fake heroes. She even tried to snatch the ID out of my wife's hand. That's when the officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, step back." But Karen couldn't stop herself. She doubled down. "She's lying. She doesn't live here. She's just trying to sneak in because she wants to use our community pool." At that point, even the neighbors couldn't hold back their laughter. One of them yelled, "Karen, she owns the biggest house on the block. She pays more HOA dues than you do." Karen's face went beet red. She opened her mouth to argue again, but then the officers pulled out their notepad. "Ma'am, we're going to need your statement, and possibly to take you in for questioning." Now here's where things really turned around. The neighbors, who had been putting up with Karen's nonsense for years, finally had enough. One by one, they stepped forward to defend my wife. She served our country while Karen harassed us about mailbox colors. She risked her life while Karen wrote tickets for leaving garbage cans out too long. Commander Reynolds is a hero. Karen is just a bully. The officers listened carefully, and the more they heard, the less they looked at my wife, and the more they looked at Karen. Finally, my wife spoke again. Her voice carried the weight of command, calm but firm. "Officers, I appreciate your time. But this woman has been harassing not just me, but this entire neighborhood. And today, she crossed the line." She looked straight at Karen. "You wanted proof that I belong here? Here it is. I serve my country. I protect your freedom. And I live in this neighborhood, whether you like it or not." Karen tried one last desperate move. But the HOA rules," the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, the only one breaking rules here is you." They didn't arrest her on the spot, but they issued a warning. File one more false report, and she'd face charges. After the cops left, the neighbors broke into applause. Some even saluted my wife. Karen stormed back to her house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. From that day forward, she avoided us like the plague. But here's the kicker. At the very next HOA meeting, the board voted her out. Too many complaints, too much embarrassment. My wife. She didn't even bother showing up to gloat. She had bigger things to focus on, her family, her career, and finally enjoying some peace at home. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple. Never pick a fight with someone you don't understand. Too often, people like Karen walk through life thinking they're untouchable. They hide behind rules, titles, or positions of authority in small spaces, and they convince themselves that gives them power over everyone else. They mistake fear for respect, and they think intimidation is the same as leadership. But here's the truth. Real power doesn't come from a clipboard, a title, or a seat on some HOA board. Real power comes from service, integrity, and respect. Karen thought she was dealing with just another homeowner she could bully into submission. She saw my wife as a threat to her authority, and tried to use fear and lies to get rid of her. But instead, she found herself up against someone who outranked her in every possible way, not just in the military, but in life. Because my wife doesn't just live in this neighborhood. She serves her country. She leads men and women into situations Karen couldn't even imagine. She carries responsibility, discipline, and honor that make HOA power look like child's play. And that's the bigger lesson here. The people you try to control might be the very people who keep your world running. The quiet neighbor you dismiss could be a doctor saving lives, an engineer building the systems you rely on, a firefighter ready to risk it all, or in this case, a Navy commander protecting your freedom on the other side of the world. When you underestimate people, you reveal more about yourself than about them. You show your arrogance. You show your ignorance. And you show how fragile your power really is. And for anyone out there who thinks an HOA title, or any small position of control, makes them untouchable, remember this story. Because titles don't protect you when the truth comes out. And the truth always comes out. Sometimes, the person you're harassing isn't just a neighbor. They're a hero. Someone who has already proven themselves in ways you can't even begin to understand. And when that truth surfaces, when the mask is ripped away, you don't just lose the argument. You lose your credibility. You lose your influence. You lose your power. So the next time you think about belittling someone, remember Karen. The woman who called the cops thinking she could expose a fraud, only to expose herself as the real fraud all along. Respect isn't about barking orders or writing violations. Respect is earned. And when you disrespect the wrong person, the fallout can shake your entire world. Because the person you underestimate today, they might be the very person standing between you and disaster tomorrow. And that's a lesson you never forget.